Hello folks, welcome back. So far what we have done is we have created a repository on our GitHub account and then we have used a git clone command to get that code onto developer system. I mean to say dev system. So these are the steps we have followed. First thing is we have created a repository on GitHub and cloned repository onto dev system. Now let's think in the opposite direction. Before creating a repository on my GitHub account, assume that I have created a repository on my local system. What is the command we use? That is git init, right? If you do remember, we have created a first repository by using git init command. So if we create a repository with git init command, then how can we update this code with the GitHub account? That is what we are going to see. For this one, I'm going to use the repository which we have initially created, that is demo repo. So that repository we are going to use to do this activity. Why? Because demo repo is not yet updated into my GitHub account. So I want to update my code into GitHub account so that developer 2 can able to pull the code. I'm going to show you how can we do that one. This is my Windows system and here we have created a repository called demo repo, right? So this is the initial repository which we have created in our developer system and it has these three files. And if I open git bash over here, okay. So if I do git status, you can see everything is clean in my local repository, nothing but I have pushed these changes to local repository, but this code is not yet updated in the GitHub yet. And also I can check git log to check the commits. So far I have done 3 commits, and usually if it is attached with the remote repository, then you can see the origin link as well, but here you can see only head link to master, nothing but it is available only in the local repository. Now my requirement is I would like to share this code with the other developer who is working on Linux system. I mean to say this is the guy. This guy is developer too, right? I would like to share this code with this developer. Then how can I do that one? Of course, I need to use the GitHub, right? So first I need to push this code to GitHub so that developer 2 can able to clone the code from the GitHub. That is what we are going to do now. Now, how can I push this code onto GitHub? Can I able to do git push origin master? Okay, we'll see what happens if I do that one. You can just see it is saying that origin does not appear to be a git repository, could not read from the remote repository, which means that it is saying that, okay boss, you are trying to push this code onto remote repository, but I don't know to which remote repository I would like to push. So now what we need to do is we need to create a remote repository. Even though we create or we initialize a repository in our local system, equivalent repository we should create in the remote repository, equivalent repository we should create in the GitHub. Then we need to combine those two, nothing but link those two repositories so that this repository code get updated into the repository which we created in the GitHub account. That is what we need to do. For this one, I'm going to create a repository called demo repo in our GitHub account and we'll link up those two. Before linking up, it's time to explore about the .git directory. So let's go inside to .git directory and see what is there. I'm giving pwd, I'm under my demo repo, and if I do ls-a to list out the hidden files as well, and you can see there is a .git directory. I will go inside to .git directory, and if I do ls, you can see there is a file called config. We are going to talk about other files time to time, but we are going to talk about config file. Let me open this config file, and you can see there is no information about origin. Usually this file contains the information of your remote repository. So far we don't have any remote repository. That is the reason you could not able to see. To understand better, I'm going to other repository that is already associated with our GitHub account. So this is already associated with our GitHub, right? I'm going to open git bash over here. And if I do pwd ls-a, you can see .git is there. I'm going inside to .git and ls again. Here you can see config, and if I open, you can just see remote origin, which means that the remote repository which is associated with this repository. So this particular repository vt git repo is associated with the repository which is available in my account, and this is the repository name. So that is how the association does happens. So even for our other repository, nothing but this repository also we need to add this remote origin. So we should have a remote repository to do that activity. Let's go to our GitHub account and create a repository over there. So this is my GitHub account, and let's go and create a repository. I can go and create from here, or else I can create from here as well. New repository. I'm creating demo repo. Okay, the name can be anything, of course, but let it be same or equivalent name so that we can avoid the confusion. So we are creating a repository called demo repo. That is the repository name we are using here as well, right? Sorry, not this one. So if we see, let me close this one. And if you see cd dot dot, we need to come out from the git, otherwise our git commands doesn't work. Okay, so you can see demo repo. This is the repository we are creating. So demo repo, and it is a public repository, and I am not initializing the readme file. I will tell you why I am not initializing. If we initialize readme file, we can just see the readme file. If we don't initialize readme file, just we can create repository. You can see some of the instructions we got to proceed further. So if we don't create repository, we will get this kind of instructions. How can you clone this repository into your local system? Or else if you have a local repository already, how can you add that one? First, we'll start from here. We can clone this repository by using HTTPS link or else SSH link. Of course, you know by this time. Next thing is, in case if we want to create a new repository first in our local system and then we want to add it, then these are the commands. Okay, first we are creating a readme file in our local system and initializing the repository and adding the code to our staging area, then committing the changes to the local repository. And this is branch, we can just ignore that one. Next thing is, you can just see git remote add origin and remote repository URL. So this is the command we should use to add our local repository with the GitHub account or remote repository. So if we do this one, this particular repository is get associated with the repository which we have created over here. That is what it is going to happen. Okay, this is what we are expecting. Once this is done, we can push our changes into our remote repository. Nothing but over here we can push it. All right, so this is another one, and at last again they have given, in case we have already done this one, we have initialized the repository and we have added our changes to local repository as well. Now we want to do this activity, that is git remote add origin, and we are adding our repository name. Let's execute this one, and before executing this one, make sure that we don't have any files which are uncommitted. Okay, so our branch is clean. Now I'm going to add this one, git remote add origin, under the origin repository name. Let me increase a little bit of font size. Yep. Okay, now let me give enter. After giving enter, let me open this file again. So ls -a, I can open this directly from the .git/config. Okay, now you can see earlier file, this is earlier one, right? There were only core entries. Now this time you can see remote origin entry also added. Why? Because we just executed this command, so that this local repository is now able to communicate with this repository. Now let's push our changes to remote repository. For that, git push origin master. Okay, let's enter. And you can see here it is trying to push changes and it won't ask for credentials. Why? Because my credentials are already updated in the repository, and if you observe this one, we have used a SSH based link, not the HTTPS link. All right, so this is how we can push our changes. Now let me refresh it to see the changes, and we can see 3 files are there and also 3 commits. In my local repository I have done 3 commits, right? All these 3 commits are available and it was done yesterday. So this is how we can update our code with the remote repository, even though we create our repository first in our local system. Next thing is, even developer to also want to work on this code. Then how can he get this code? It is quite simple. Why? Because once it is available over here, he just need to clone it in case he is doing it at first time. Now we can use SSH link or HTTPS link. Why? Because we have keys as well as we have passwords. So we don't have any issue. So I'm using SSH link only. Clear the screen, and I'm already in the test repo repository. I don't want to clone my another repository inside this repository. So come out, git clone and repository name. Okay, so I'm cloning the repository with SSH link, and we should able to clone it successfully. So this is how we can work collaboratively by using GitHub. That's all for this section. In next section, we are going to do similar kind of activity, but we'll see as a developer perspective, how can we create a project and push changes to the remote repository. That is what we are going to do. Thanks for watching and see you there.